Welcome to Seller's Journey, the podcast where we speak to great sales reps and leaders and share their real stories from start to sales success.
Hi everyone, I'm Joseph Fung and I am here with Ryan Wicklum. He's the head of business development at the Owl Solutions. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, the pleasure's mine. I definitely appreciate the time.
Ryan, I'm so excited to share your journey. I love how you spoke about you spending 20 years in supply chain management, wanting to get into sales, having that opportunity. But maybe we could start off at the beginning. Can you share, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? Where does the story start?
It's funny. I grew up in a small town north of Barrie called Phelpston, Ontario, Canada. And only 250 people in my hometown. So it was an interesting upbringing of, the intersection of small town, and my dad was in the military. So I had both kind of influences in life. But I attended University of Guelph for 1 year before heading home to take care of my father who had become ill. And then after he passed, I was kind of deeply immersed in the automotive industry. So the operations world was my playground for a good long while.
Nice. And you're at the Owl Solutions now, right?
I am so, yes.
Well, now, I know we spoke, this isn't a show about pitching, but for our audience who might not know the Owl Solutions, what's the one sentence elevator pitch?
Absolutely. So the Owl Solutions we have a data analytics platform called True Owl, and it kind of lives at the intersection of supply chain knowledge and innovation. Basically, we are the supply chain analyst of the future.
Wow. And so those 20 years in supply chain definitely help out there.
It was a natural transition. And I must point out that it was my friend Christine McDougall who kind of brought up the idea of she knew I wanted to transition into sales. So she brought up the idea of maybe using a company that sells an operations or supply chain service. And that kind of spurred on the idea. And I had some conversations, and luckily the Owl Solutions was where I ended up.
Nice. Now, 20 years in supply chain. Did you get into supply chain right out of school? Was that your first job post-graduation?
Actually, it's funny because I spent 1 year at the University of Guelph, and I unfortunately didn't graduate because when the family situation was taken care of, I was, I worked my way from a temp on the midnight shift at a Magna factory to being a shift supervisor in the 4 years.
Wow.
So I kind of had a good transition. I was making decent money. Always wanted to go back to get that education that I didn't pick up, a formal education, so to speak. But I learned so much in my time at Magna and my time since that, I like to think that I've gone to college and I've gone to a post-secondary education every day.
That's incredible. And that drive and that passion, I could see how that's going to serve you really well in the sales arena as well.
Absolutely. Fingers crossed.
So let's think about that journey. So 20 years in supply chain, you shared a little tidbit when we were first speaking about how you've always wanted to be in sales, but that for a variety of reasons or hesitation, you hadn't. And the thing that struck me was you spoke about how even when you shared that excitement, that interest in being in sales, you sometimes received some hesitation or some uncertainty or some assumptions. Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that there was and by no means is this is my perception only. I'm not saying that it's gospel or set in stone, but I think that there was a stigma attached to the fact that I was kind of what you might call a backroom employee, because I'd been in the supply chain and operations realm for so long. I think that there was definitely a bit of a stigma attached to the fact that I was a quote unquote operations guy, and that I might not be as refined or might not have the softer skills necessary to deal with people on a more interpersonal basis on the regular, which is what salespeople ultimately do. They have conversations, they deal with people, they deal with situations, they negotiate. And so it was a little bit frustrating because as a supply chain professional, you are having these same conversations, but almost in reverse. I used to be on the other side of the negotiation table, and I would look across at the salesperson, and I would think to myself, like, I would love to be in that situation because I've built up this almost this repertoire or this repository of supply chain tricks that I could use to almost capitalize on in a sales role.
So let's kind of unbox this a little bit. We speak to sales reps all the time. We often hear their stories, and people hear these words: purchasing, operations, supply chain. Maybe you could help our audience. In a nutshell, kind of running or managing supply chain. What's that involve? What's that day-to-day work?
Absolutely. So I guess I would deem supply chain as the movement of goods from customer want to customer have. And sorry, I say goods or services, because that's often what is brought upon. So in the case of typical supply chain day, you kind of need to unwrap the two boxes as strategic and tactical. So on a tactical basis, yes, you are actually purchasing things or services, or you are shipping items from A to B. You might be in a warehouse where you're picking, arranging inventory, etc. But on the other side, there's a lot of strategic aspects that I think sometimes are unseen or just ignored, regarding building relationships, having strategic suppliers that you can almost consider as supply partners. Because when crap hits the fan, you need that supplier to back you up and to be there in your corner, and you need them to believe in the company's story. And I think one of the things that was so good about my time at ClearPath was the fact that we had a very compelling story to tell. And I think that a lot of suppliers that we dealt with believed in the story, and they wanted to be a part of that kind of scrappy robotic startup that became this thriving company.
There's some remarkable parallels between the way you speak about those strategic relationships and the way we hear sales reps speak about their strategic customers that buy into the story and all of that. That's quite a remarkable parallel.
100%.
So I want to come back to something you dropped in earlier. You said you had all these little tricks that you'd use on the supply chain, and now you're thinking about them when you're on the other side.
Yes.
Maybe you could share a few of those. What's that like?
Well, to uncover all my purchasing brethren tricks, but yeah, there are things that a supply chain person will do to kind of almost create a sense of mystique, or a sense of, or almost like a proverbial org chart that is above them, when in essence, I'd say my estimate would be 97% of decisions that are brought to the table can be made by that supply chain person. And then the other 3% would be, I genuinely need to bring this to finance, or bring this to the VP of operations or a director, because you often, I think the perception that the supply chain people sometimes try to put forth is that there's a lot of levels of approval that are above. So I can't make a decision now. Let's narrow it down to the best price, or the best arrangement, the best negotiation. And oftentimes, when a salesperson, I would look across at the salesperson, I would think to myself, you know what, they don't really want to deal with more levels than me. So they would just get right to the point. Here's the best I can do. Let's make a deal now.
Wow. So they're going through kind of these actions to help massage what that selling experience is like. And now that you're on the other side, how do you see those, and how do you handle them?
Oh, it's funny, because now being on the sales side, I recognize that it wasn't a lack of want to deal with more people than the person across the table. It was just a lack of time. There's so many more opportunities, and the pipeline is so full that you don't want to spend any extra hours or any extra days or weeks dealing with being introduced to more people and kind of making that relationship as well. You need to be have more brevity involved, and more limiting of the interaction, and almost like an instant deepening. That's a skill that you kind of pick up to kind of make that relationship quick. Let's get this price down, and then let's move on.
Those kind of new perspectives and realizations are always such a delight, aren't they?
Absolutely. It's absolutely fantastic.
So I'm curious, now that you're kind of more focused on the sales side, is there anything about that sales role, sales side, that's really surprised you, that's really kind of changed your perspective?
You know what, I would say I've always known that there was a definite science to sales, but I've been amazed by the amount of sales processes and operational aspects. There's that, and then the theory behind the practice is astounding. I've also known that there's a lot of acronyms that I didn't know before kind of entering to the sales realm. And I've done. It's been a big learning curve in the past few months just to kind of understand how the infrastructure of sales operations supports the actual, like the front facing sales.
That's such a great realization, because it is so true, and the longer that we're in it, the easier it is to lose track of that. So it's a great reminder as well.
100%.
Now, your journey is this kind of remarkable tale of patience, of drive, of determination, and incredible domain expertise. I love how you spoke about how you'd always wanted to get into sales, and now you've had that chance. How did it come to be? How did you get into this sales role?
It's funny. My stay at ClearPath was, like I said, I was employee number 7 at ClearPath. I came in really early, helped establish a supply chain there, and then 6 years later there was a layoff, and I was as a part of that, and then I transitioned into almost doing my own thing. So I was out. I was kind of supporting. I was building my own infrastructure to success. And then one of my clients was Hugo. Hugo is the CEO of the Owl Solutions, and I was doing some consulting for him. And then as the consulting gig kind of slowed down, it became evident that there was a connection between the two of us, and we both had commonalities in that we were supply chain people, and we identified with that. But then we also were kind of thrust upon. We both had a want to learn more about sales and to build our kind of sales repertoire. And so he brought me on as employee number 1, which is an honor of any company to be like the first full-time hire. And in this case, it was great. It was there was a connection, and there was a synergy involved, because I wanted to break into the sales world, and like Christina put forth, it was great to have that opportunity that I could kind of combine my supply chain expertise with this newfound opportunity and a role that I was passionate about.
That's such a great experience. So you're on the other side now. You're in the midst of it, but looking back at that journey, what's one thing that you would have told yourself of 10 years ago?
10 years ago, I would have told myself to buy a lot of Shopify stock. but other than that, I think that I would tell myself to learn about new technologies. I think that's the one aspect that I had to this point had kind of put aside, thinking, well, I'll just learn about this stuff later, etc. I'll be frank. I'm the world's worst operator of Excel. It scares me to death to this day, and it's good because what we do at the Owl Solutions is kind of a Excel augmentation, or in some cases actually replacing Excel, which is fantastic, because it's almost like a personal vendetta almost against Excel and the heartache and the amount of hours I've spent trying to figure out what a VLOOKUP was.
I love how you speak about the pain that the end user feels, because doing that right is such an important part of sales, and you've got that down pat.
Fingers crossed that continues.
Well, this has been awesome. Before we wrap up, I wanted to quickly flip over and ask a couple of rapid fire questions. Are you game for that?
Yep, absolutely. Let's
awesome.
Do it.
Okay, cool. So let's do this quickly and get people to know Rick a little bit more. Sorry, I knew that I was going to say, you passed that joke. People say Ryan Wicklum and they call you Rick, and I knew it was going to come up. I'm sorry, Ryan.
Don't apologize. It happened more than I would think.
What was it that you said happened when people made the mistake? Your colleague would stick something to the wall?
Yeah. So we at ClearPath, we had a famous Rick counter. So every time someone would write "Hi Rick" in an email, we would post a picture of a famous Rick on the wall, and we had it was a huge collection of famous Ricks.
Well, there we go. I'm gonna have to find a picture of a famous Rick to send over to you for that.
I look forward to it.
but rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Let me jump right in. What's your favorite sales tool?
Navigator. I love it.
Nice. And what's your favorite movie?
A tie between Shawshank Redemption and Scent of Woman. Shawshank for the story,
Ooh.
Scent of Woman for Al Pacino's Suits.
Oh, great choices. And when you were a kid, what did you want to grow up to be?
I want to be a sports commentator.
Wow, there we go. Rick, Ryan, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for the time today.
No, I've enjoyed it, and I appreciate you having me on.
I am looking forward to our next conversation, and we will chat again soon.
I look forward to it.